The station, Aurum Spire, floated in the heart of the Orion Arm, a jewel of alien ingenuity surrounded by the cold void. It was a bustling hub, thrumming with the activity of dozens of alien species who navigated its spiraling pathways. To the untrained human eye, it was chaos. To the locals, it was symphony and order. Humanity had been allowed a meager presence on the station for trade and diplomacy, a privilege begrudgingly extended by the Council of Elders, who viewed them as little more than an amusing upstart species. And for the most part, the humans had played their role, quiet, small-time traders, desperate to eke out an existence in the grander galactic tapestry. Until now. The airlock hissed open, and Commander Aaron Vale stepped out onto the polished obsidian deck of the Council chamber, flanked by two aides in formal Earth Alliance uniforms. The human's crisp attire and restrained posture contrasted sharply with the riot of colors, scales, and carapaces displayed by the alien dignitaries. At the center of the room sat the Council itself, a semicircle of towering beings representing the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations. "You are late," rumbled Othrix, a massive, insectoid Vorlon with mandibles clicking in disdain. "A predictable trait of your species." Aaron ignored the jab and walked calmly to the speaking platform. A sphere of iridescent light hovered above it, indicating that the proceedings were being recorded and broadcast across multiple systems. "My apologies, counselors," Aaron said, his voice steady despite the intense scrutiny. "We had complications with docking clearance?" "That is because your ships are an embarrassment," snorted Suvrek, a reptilian Scar ambassador with emerald scales that gleamed under the chamber's lights. "Your presence here is tolerated only because the trade guilds insist on dealing with you. Let us not forget your place, human." Aaron's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. Humanity's struggles to integrate into galactic society had been fraught with condescension and outright hostility. The Council viewed humans as primitives, barely evolved from their ancient wars and petty disputes. They lacked the history, the mystique, the gravitas of the elder species, and this was a truth the galaxy never tired of reminding them. But this time, Aaron wasn't here to beg for scraps. "We're here," he said evenly, "because we've uncovered something of great importance to the entire galactic community." A ripple of skepticism passed through the chamber. "Oh?" drawled Elithra, a crystalline Tharn whose body refracted light into dazzling rainbows. "And what could your infant species possibly discover that warrants our attention?" Aaron smiled faintly, a flash of teeth that wasn't entirely friendly. "Something buried, something forgotten. A fragment of the past that even the elder species have lost." That got their attention. The counselors leaned forward, or, in the case of those without recognizable faces, shifted in ways that conveyed intrigue. The galaxy's oldest civilizations prided themselves on their unbroken histories, their ancient traditions. To suggest that humanity had stumbled upon something they had forgotten was audacious, almost offensive. Suvrek's slitted eyes narrowed. "Elaborate." Quickly. Aaron motioned to his aide, who stepped forward with a holographic projector. A moment later, a glowing map of a distant, unremarkable star system appeared above the platform. "This," Aaron began, "is the Pyxis cluster, a region long considered devoid of significant artifacts or settlements. However, during a routine exploration mission, we detected anomalous energy signatures emanating from a desolate moon orbiting Pyxis 12. The projection zoomed in, showing the barren surface of the moon and the faint outline of something buried beneath its crust. Further investigation revealed a structure," Aaron continued, "one composed of materials and architectural styles not associated with any known species. We believe it predates even the oldest records in the galactic archives." The chamber fell silent. The weight of Aaron's words hung in the air. "And why?" rumbled Othrix, breaking the tension. "Should we believe this is anything more than human exaggeration? Your kind has a flair for theatrics." Aaron's faint smile returned. "Because we translated its inscription." That drew an audible murmur from the gathered dignitaries. "It spoke of a people," Aaron said, his voice growing stronger, "who lived in harmony with the stars themselves. A civilization whose language has been extinct for so long that even your oldest records mention it only in whispers." Elithra's crystalline body shimmered with what might have been excitement or apprehension. "You are claiming," they said slowly, "that you have deciphered a language none of us remember?" "Yes," Aaron said. "And what we uncovered changes everything." His words were punctuated by a sudden tension in the air, as though the station itself had gone still to listen. Before the council could respond, the chamber's doors slid open and a new figure entered. It was a Zellner, one of the galaxy's rarest and most enigmatic species. Their appearance was ghost-like, their semi-transparent form shifting with iridescent light. This particular Zellner was ancient, even by their standards, and their presence commanded an immediate silence. I would hear what the humans have to say, the Zellner intoned, their voice echoing like a distant melody. Aaron inclined his head respectfully. Of course. He stepped aside as the projector shifted to display a series of intricate symbols, curved, looping glyphs that seemed to pulse with a strange rhythm. This is the language we found, Aaron said. We call it the Celestine script. It was painstaking to translate, but we managed. And the first phrase we uncovered was this. The symbols shifted, and Aaron spoke the words aloud. The reaction was immediate and visceral. Othrix recoiled, his mandibles clicking in a way that sounded almost panicked. Suvrek let out a sharp hiss, his claws digging into the armrests of his chair. Elithra's crystalline form vibrated violently, refracting light in a chaotic dance. Even the ancient Zellner froze, their form flickering as if struggling to maintain cohesion. What is the meaning of this? Suvrek snarled, his voice laced with something that might have been fear. Aaron's expression was unreadable. The phrase translates to, "We are the first and we will be the last." The chamber erupted into chaos. The counselors shouted over one another, their voices a cacophony of anger, disbelief, and something deeper, something darker. Aaron let them argue, his mind focused on the next phase of his mission. He knew this was only the beginning. The Celestine script was more than just a linguistic curiosity, it was a key, a weapon, and perhaps a reckoning. Humanity had been laughed at, dismissed, and underestimated for too long. But now, with the dead language of an ancient power in their hands, they had the galaxy's attention. For better or worse. The council chamber was still in disarray. Alien voices clashed, their words a tangled symphony of disbelief and raw emotion. Commander Aaron Vale stood silent at the speaking platform, his presence dwarfed by the towering figures of the alien counselors, but in that moment, it was clear he held the upper hand. Enough. The voice of the Zellner delegate, Escharin, cut through the cacophony like a blade. Their iridescent form shimmered with intensity, and the room fell into uneasy silence. Even the notoriously stubborn Suvrek stopped mid-snarl. Escharin floated forward, their semi-translucent form gliding as if untethered by gravity. This language, Escharin said, their voice carrying the weight of eons, is not a lie. I recognize it. A ripple of shock passed through the chamber. For the Zellner to admit recognition of the Celestine script was monumental. They were the galaxy's living memory, keepers of knowledge older than most stars, and yet they were notoriously secretive, their history as veiled as the nebulas they inhabited. You recognize it? Suvrek's voice was sharp, his scaled body coiled with tension. Impossible. This human is playing tricks. No, Escharin said simply, their tone unyielding. The words he has spoken are real. They belong to the Celestine Ascendancy. The chamber fell into stunned silence. The Celestine Ascendancy? Aaron asked, his tone carefully neutral, though his mind raced. This was the first time he'd heard the name. Escharin turned their luminous gaze toward him. A name not spoken in countless millennia. The Celestines were something more than a civilization. They were architects of the cosmos, builders of the great stellar conduits that once linked the galaxy in ways you cannot imagine. Aaron frowned. If they were so powerful, what happened to them? Why are they gone? The Zellner hesitated, their form flickering slightly. They disappeared, Escharin said, the words heavy with unease. Not through war or plague, but by choice. They left no trace but whispers. And now it seems your species has found their echo. Wait. Suvrek's eyes burned with suspicion. If this language is truly theirs, how did humans, a species barely capable of leaving their own gravity well, come to possess it? What game are you playing, Vale? Aaron straightened, his voice firm. No games, counselor. As I said, we uncovered it during a survey mission. The inscriptions were buried in a structure deep beneath the moon's surface. We have no intention of hoarding this discovery. Convenient, Suvrek hissed. And yet you speak their language with ease. Tell me, human, how do you translate the words of the ancients so quickly? Or shall I accuse you of fabricating them entirely? Aaron suppressed the urge to roll his eyes. He had expected resistance, but the truth was far stranger than Suvrek could imagine. We didn't translate it entirely on our own, Aaron admitted. When we first encountered the symbols, we realized there were patterns, something familiar yet completely alien. Our linguists were stumped until one of our scientists recognized fragments that matched. Something from Earth? This drew confused murmurs from the chamber. Even Escharin tilted their head, a gesture of curiosity. Fragments? Othrix rasped. Explain yourself, human. Aaron took a measured breath. The symbols matched elements of an extinct human language, one over 5,000 years old. A proto-language, long dead, known only through fragments on ancient clay tablets. We call it Sumerian. The reaction was electric. Aliens who had remained silent now erupted into disbelief. Othrix's mandibles clattered violently, while Suvrek's claws scratched deep grooves into his seat. Elithra's crystalline body refracted light in jagged patterns, a clear sign of alarm. A coincidence? Suvrek spat. It must be. The odds of such a connection are infinitesimal. This is human arrogance at its peak. It's no coincidence, Aaron said, his voice steel. The structures on Pixis 12 are older than anything on Earth by at least 1,000,000 years. And yet there's a connection. Something links our species to theirs. Something buried in our past. Blasphemy? Suvrek rose, towering over the humans. You dare suggest your primitive kind shares kinship with the Celestines? You are nothing but children, crawling in the dirt of a galaxy you barely comprehend. Enough, Escharon interrupted, their tone like the toll of a bell. The humans have provided evidence. As distasteful as it may be to your pride, Scar, we cannot dismiss it. And what do you propose we do, Zellner? Suvrek snarled. Indulge this charade? Allow these children to meddle in matters beyond their station? Escharon's form shifted, growing darker, heavier, as if their presence were weighing down the room itself. No, they said softly, yet their words carried an edge. I propose we investigate. The Celestine ascendancy is not a trivial matter. If the humans have truly unlocked a fragment of their legacy, we must know what it means, for all of us. Aaron seized the opening. The structure we uncovered is just the beginning. Initial scans show that it's part of a network. There are other sites scattered across the galaxy, hidden beneath layers of time. But we can't access them without your help. And why? Suvrek sneered. Should we share our resources with you? Because this affects all of us, Aaron shot back, his voice rising. The Celestines didn't just build structures. They left warnings. Messages encoded in their language, messages we've barely begun to understand. If we ignore this, we risk repeating whatever fate befell them. That last line seemed to strike a nerve. Even the haughty Suvrek hesitated, his claws twitching as if grasping at something unseen. What kind of warnings? Elithra asked, their crystalline form dimming. Aaron met their gaze. The inscription we translated, the one that began with "We are the first and we will be the last," ended with something else. A single word, Calathar. The word hung in the air like a storm cloud. Escharon's form flickered violently. You are certain of this translation? Aaron nodded. Yes. Do you know what it means? Escharon hesitated, their translucent body trembling as if caught in a cosmic wind. When they finally spoke, their voice was barely above a whisper. It means the Devourer. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Aaron leaned forward. What is the Devourer? Escharon's form grew impossibly still. A myth. A story older than the stars. It is said that the Celestines did not vanish. They fled, abandoning this galaxy to escape. Aaron's pulse quickened. Escape what? The Zellner turned to him, their luminous form now dim and shadowed. An entity beyond comprehension. A force that consumes not just life but existence itself. If the Celestines left a warning about the Calathar, they trailed off, their voice trembling with a rare and uncharacteristic fear. It means, they finished, that it is still out there. The room exploded into chaos once more, but Aaron's mind was elsewhere. He stared at the glowing glyphs of the Celestine script, the alien symbols that had awakened a long-dormant truth. Humanity had stumbled upon something ancient and terrible. And now, whether they were ready or not, the galaxy was looking to them for answers. The meeting adjourned in disarray, with council members retreating to their chambers, their minds burdened by what they had heard. Aaron Vale remained behind, standing in the now empty council chamber. The echoes of the debates still lingered in the vast room, but his focus was elsewhere. His team had uncovered something monumental, and now the burden of truth felt heavier than ever. You played that well, said Lieutenant Anika Harlow, his chief aide, as she approached him. Her sharp features softened slightly as she looked at Aaron's pensive expression. But we're not out of the woods yet. The council's not going to back us without a fight. Aaron let out a dry chuckle. The council's not the problem, Anika. It's what we've woken up. Did you see Escharon's reaction? The Zellner don't flinch easily, and that word, Calathar*, shook them to their core. It's just a story, Anika said, though her voice carried no conviction. Aaron turned to her, his gaze intense. Do you really believe that? The Celestines didn't just vanish. They were running from something. And if the Calathar is still out there? He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. Hours later, Aaron and his team sat aboard the Earth Alliance ship Resolute. The sleek vessel was docked within Aurum Spire's vast hangar, dwarfed by the towering ships of the elder species. Inside the ship's briefing room, holograms of the Celestine script hovered above the table, casting faint blue light on the faces of the assembled crew. All right, Aaron began, addressing the group of scientists, linguists, and tactical officers gathered around him. We're officially on our own for now. The Council won't act until they've debated this to death, and we don't have time for their politics. We need to keep moving. Anika tapped a control pad and the hologram shifted, showing the partially translated Celestine inscription from Pixis 12. This is everything we've decoded so far, she said. It's fragmentary, but it's enough to confirm that the structure isn't a tomb or a monument. It's a repository. A kind of archive left behind by the Celestines. Dr. Elias Wren, the team's lead archaeologist, leaned forward, his voice tinged with excitement. We've barely scratched the surface of what's down there. The glyphs we've translated suggest that the Celestines used these repositories to store more than knowledge. They stored pathways. Pathways? Aaron asked. Star charts, Elias clarified. But not just any charts. These don't map existing routes or systems. They describe hidden conduits, corridors through space that no modern civilization has ever discovered. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Are you saying the Celestines built a network of, what? Wormholes? Anika asked. Possibly, Elias replied. Or something more advanced. The inscriptions reference threads of the eternal fabric. It's poetic, but it suggests a method of travel that bypasses traditional space-time constraints entirely. If we can decode the full archive, we might be able to follow these pathways. And go where? Aaron pressed. Elias hesitated. That's the question, isn't it? The repository on Pixis 12 doesn't just map the conduits, it warns against using them. The phrase is clear, the paths lead only to the jaws of the devourer. The tension in the room was palpable. Fantastic, Anika muttered. So the only people who've ever built a way to escape the Calathar also left us a giant neon sign saying, "Do not enter." Aaron's brow furrowed. And yet they left the maps intact. What? If these conduits were truly so dangerous, why didn't they destroy the archives? Maybe they couldn't, Elias suggested. Or maybe they knew someone would need them one day. Someone like us. Aaron leaned back in his chair, staring at the holograms. The Celestines didn't build these repositories randomly. They had a purpose, a reason for preserving this knowledge. And I don't believe they left it behind just to scare us off. There's something they wanted us to find. A silence fell over the group until Lieutenant Harlow spoke up, her voice hesitant. There's something else, she said, pulling up another hologram. This one showed a series of glyphs that glowed faintly, arranged in concentric circles. These symbols appeared when we activated the primary chamber on Pixis 12, Anika explained. We thought they were decorative at first, but they're not. Elias nodded. It's a star map. And it points to a second repository. The hologram shifted again, displaying the coordinates of a distant system on the outer edges of the galactic map. This system is uncharted, Anika said. No records in the galactic archives, no known trade routes, nothing. It's deep in the Veil Nebula, a region barely explored because of its extreme gravitational anomalies. Aaron studied the map. If the Celestines hid a second repository out there, it must contain something the first one didn't. Something critical. Or something dangerous, Elias added grimly. Aaron nodded. We don't have a choice. If this repository holds more answers, or another piece of the puzzle, we need to find it before anyone else does. And what if we're walking into a trap? Anika asked. Aaron met her gaze, his voice steady. Then we'll deal with it. Humanity has come too far to back down now. The journey to the Veil Nebula was fraught with tension. The Resolute left Aurum Spire under the pretense of returning to Earth, but the ship's true course was masked by advanced navigational countermeasures. Aaron knew they couldn't risk tipping off the Council or anyone else who might try to intervene. The crew worked tirelessly during the voyage, analyzing every fragment of Celestine script they had recovered. As they approached the nebula, the ship's sensors began to struggle, overwhelmed by the region's gravitational distortions. Entering the Veil, the helmsman reported, his voice tight. Sensors are patchy, but we're holding steady. Aaron stood at the viewport, staring out at the swirling clouds of gas and light that filled the void. The nebula was a kaleidoscope of colors, beautiful yet ominous. Somewhere within that chaotic expanse lay the second repository. "Anything on the scanners?" he asked. "Faint energy signature," Anika replied, her hands flying over the console. "It's weak, but it matches the frequency we detected on Pyxis 12. Aaron nodded. "Take us in." Slow and steady. As the Resolute ventured deeper into the nebula, the energy signature grew stronger, guiding them toward its source. Finally, the ship emerged into a clearing, a vast expanse of space surrounded by shimmering tendrils of gas. And there it was. The structure floated in the void, an enormous, angular monolith covered in glyphs that glowed faintly against the darkness. It was similar to the repository on Pyxis 12, yet larger and more complex. The sight of it sent a shiver down Aaron's spine. "Bring us into docking range," he ordered. The crew worked quickly, maneuvering the ship toward the ancient structure. As they approached, the monolith's glyphs began to pulse, as if recognizing their presence. Elias stared at the display in awe. "It's activating, just like the first one?" Aaron's jaw tightened. "Then let's hope this one has the answers we're looking for." But deep in his gut, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The airlock hissed open, and Aaron stepped into the ancient repository. The faint hum of energy pulsed through the walls, the glyphs illuminating the dark corridors with an eerie, rhythmic glow. Behind him, Anika, Elias, and a team of scientists and security personnel followed, their expressions a mix of awe and trepidation. "Stay alert," Aaron ordered, his voice steady despite the unease gnawing at him. "We don't know what we're walking into." The interior of the repository was vast and labyrinthine, its corridors spiraling outward like the threads of a spider's web. The glyphs shifted and shimmered, their patterns constantly rearranging as if the structure itself were alive. Every step deeper felt like descending into the heart of a living organism. "This place is incredible," Elias whispered, running his hand along the smooth, glowing surface of the wall. "It's far more advanced than the first repository. The energy levels here are off the charts. Can you find the central chamber?" Aaron asked. Elias nodded, checking his handheld scanner. "The energy signature peaks about 200 meters ahead. That has to be it." They moved cautiously, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the structure and the occasional clatter of boots on the metallic floor. The deeper they went, the more the glyphs seemed to react to their presence, brightening and shifting with increasing urgency. "Anyone else think it feels like this place knows we're here?" Anika muttered, gripping her rifle tightly. Aaron didn't respond. He felt it too, a growing sense of being observed, of something ancient and vast stirring just beyond the edges of perception. Finally, they reached the central chamber. The room was enormous, its ceiling disappearing into shadow. At its center stood a towering obelisk, its surface covered in swirling glyphs that pulsed with golden light. Surrounding it were 7 smaller structures, arranged in a circle like sentinels guarding their king. "This is it," Elias said, his voice hushed with reverence. "The heart of the repository." Aaron approached the obelisk cautiously, his eyes scanning its surface. The glyphs seemed to ripple as he neared, their patterns forming recognizable shapes, words. "They're changing," Anika said, stepping closer. "It's reacting to you, Aaron." He reached out, hesitating only for a moment before placing his hand against the obelisk's surface. The glyphs flared brightly and a deep, resonant hum filled the chamber. Suddenly, the smaller structures around the obelisk began to rise, their tops unfolding like petals to reveal crystalline spheres suspended in beams of light. "What's happening?" Anika shouted, raising her weapon. Elias stared in awe. "I think it's unlocking." The obelisk's hum grew louder, and Aaron felt a strange warmth spreading through his body, as if the structure were reaching into his very essence. Then a voice, soft yet impossibly vast, echoed in his mind. "You are late." Aaron staggered back, his breath caught in his throat. "Did anyone else hear that?" he gasped. The others shook their heads, their expressions confused. But the voice continued, speaking directly to him. "The keybearers have failed. The devourer stirs. You stand in their place, unprepared." Aaron's mind raced. "Who are you? What is this place?" he asked aloud. The obelisk pulsed and the voice replied. "We are the Celestines, architects of the conduits. This is our archive, a beacon left for those who might rise in our absence. But you are not what we expected." Aaron clenched his fists. "What do you mean? What were you expecting?" "Not you." The voice carried a note of regret. "Yet you have found the language. You have awakened the legacy. And now you must bear its burden." The glyphs on the obelisk shifted again, forming images. A galaxy consumed by darkness, stars winking out one by one. The Calathar the Devourer. The Devourer, Aaron murmured, staring at the vision. What is it? How do we stop it? The voice hesitated as if choosing its words carefully. The Devourer is entropy given form. It is the end of all things, drawn to the energy of creation itself. We fled its hunger, but its shadow remains. You cannot stop it. You can only survive it. The room trembled as the smaller structures began to emit beams of light, converging on the obelisk. The energy coalesced into a single point above the obelisk, forming a glowing sphere that pulsed with immense power. What is that? Anika asked, her voice trembling. The Celestine Key, the voice answered. A fragment of our knowledge. It will guide you to the conduits, to the paths that may yet save you. But beware, the paths are perilous and the Devourer will follow. Aaron stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the glowing sphere. Why us? Why now? The voice grew softer, almost mournful. Because you are here. Because you are all that remains. Humanity is young, but you possess a spark of what we once were. Perhaps it will be enough. The sphere descended, hovering just above Aaron's outstretched hands. He hesitated, feeling the immense weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Then, with a deep breath, he reached out and grasped it. The moment his fingers touched the sphere, a flood of knowledge surged through him. Star charts, mathematical equations, images of distant worlds and forgotten civilizations. And amidst it all, a single haunting vision. The Calathar, a vast and unknowable darkness, devouring everything in its path. Aaron fell to his knees, gasping for air as the sphere dissolved into light and disappeared. Around him, the chamber began to tremble violently. Captain? Anika shouted, grabbing his arm. We need to move. The whole place is collapsing. The team scrambled for the exit as the repository shook itself apart. The glyphs dimmed and flickered, and pieces of the structure began to break away, vanishing into the void. They barely made it back to the Resolute before the repository disintegrated entirely, leaving only a cloud of shimmering particles where it had once stood. Back on the bridge, Aaron sat in his chair, his mind still reeling from the experience. He stared at the star charts now displayed on the main console, maps of the Celestine conduits, pathways that promised both salvation and danger. What now? Anika asked, standing beside him. Aaron's gaze hardened. We follow the path. The Celestines left this for a reason and we can't ignore it. The Devourer is out there and if there's even a chance we can stop it, or survive it, we have to try. Anika nodded, though her expression was grim. The Council isn't going to like this. Let them debate, Aaron said firmly. We don't have time to wait for them. He looked out at the swirling colors of the Veil Nebula, feeling the weight of the galaxy pressing down on him. Humanity had been laughed at, dismissed as insignificant. But now they were the ones holding the key to an ancient mystery, a legacy that might determine the fate of all life. As the Resolute set course for the first conduit, Aaron knew there was no turning back. The Celestines had chosen them, or perhaps fate had, and now it was up to humanity to face the darkness. And for the first time he felt the faintest flicker of hope.